There is a version of you that does not beg for permission. She does not over-explain her decisions. She does not shrink herself to make other people comfortable. She does not wait for the perfect moment, the perfect approval, or the perfect guarantee before she moves. She moves because she has decided. Most people think this archetype is about beauty, seduction, luxury, power. Those are only the surface. The real Cleopatra archetype is not about looking like a queen. It's about developing the mind of one. If you gave someone Cleopatra's crown today, nothing about their life would automatically change. A crown doesn't create sovereignty. A throne doesn't create authority. Power begins somewhere much smaller and much harder to see. In the private moment, a person decides, my life belongs to me. But here's the warning almost no one gives you. The exact same energy that makes you confident, strategic, and magnetic is one decision away from making you cold, controlling, and completely alone. So this isn't going to be a video about activating Cleopatra like it's a costume. Every method I show you today comes with its shadow attached, because you can't safely build one without watching the other. And at the end, I'll give you a 7-day way to actually live this, starting tomorrow morning, not in theory, in your actual decisions. Carl Jung didn't see archetypes as characters in a story. He saw them as recurring patterns in the human psyche, patterns that keep showing up across myths, religions, dreams, and behavior in cultures that never spoke to each other. The mother, the hero, the trickster, the shadow, the king. Jung never wrote Cleopatra by name, but through his lens she represents something instantly recognizable: the sovereign feminine, the strategist, the woman who doesn't ask permission to want more, and who understands that charm without strategy is fragile, while strategy without presence is forgettable. So when I say activate the archetype, I don't mean pretend to be her. I mean wake up the qualities she represents and stay conscious enough not to let them curdle. Here's where we start, not with action, with attention. Jung believes symbols weren't decoration. They were bridges, a way of connecting the conscious mind to something deeper that words can't quite reach. Modern psychology offers an interesting perspective that echoes Jung's intuition. Researchers often refer to a phenomenon called environmental priming, the idea that the environments we repeatedly expose ourselves to subtly influence our attention, emotions, and behavior. Jung described this through symbols rather than laboratory experiments. He believed symbols awaken patterns already present within the unconscious, different language, similar observation. What surrounds you slowly becomes part of the way you experience yourself. Your mind responds to what it repeatedly sees. What you look at often, you begin to remember. What you remember, you begin to identify with. And what you identify with, you eventually act from. So the first practice is symbolic immersion. Choose an image, an object, a colour that represents this archetype to you. Not something that just looks pretty. Something that makes you feel something the moment you look at it. Straighter spine, clearer head, a quiet remember who you are. Don't choose the most beautiful image. Choose the one that genuinely changes the way you feel the moment you see it. Then spend 1 quiet minute with it every morning, not admiring it, reflecting. Ask yourself, if Cleopatra were facing today's biggest challenge in my life, how would she think about it? Jung called this active imagination. It isn't pretending to become someone else. It's using symbolic dialogue to uncover psychological qualities that may already exist within you but have remained unconscious. Ask yourself honestly, when I look at this, what wakes up? Do I feel stronger, or do I feel tension, arrogance, pressure? That matters, because sometimes what we call attraction is actually confrontation. You may be drawn to this image not because you already embody her, but because you abandon the part of yourself she represents, the part that stopped asking for what it wanted years ago. If that's true for you, the symbol isn't just beautiful, it's a mirror, and it's asking one question. Where did you give your crown away? Here's the shadow of this one. Symbols can also become a costume you hide behind, collecting the aesthetic of power while changing nothing underneath. If the image on your wall doesn't eventually show up in a decision you make, it was never a bridge. It was decoration. Most people study Cleopatra backwards. The makeup, the jewellery, the drama. That's the least useful lesson available. If you actually want this archetype, study how she read power. She ruled Egypt surrounded by empires, rivals, and men who underestimated her. And her survival wasn't built on being liked. It was built on perception, timing, understanding that the direct path isn't always the strongest one. That's not manipulation. That's strategy. And strategy starts with one question. What is actually happening here? Not what you wish were happening. Not what hurts less to believe. What's actually true? This is where the archetype gets uncomfortable, because it stops you from romanticizing people who already showed you who they are. It stops you from calling avoidance peace, fear, patience, comfort, alignment. Quick practice. For the next 7 days before any real decision, ask yourself one question. Am I reacting emotionally or responding strategically? That single habit can quietly redirect your entire year. And here's where it turns. The same clarity that cuts through illusion can turn into something else if left alone too long. A coldness that stops giving anyone the benefit of the doubt. Strategic thinking that forgets people aren't chess pieces. We'll come back to exactly where that line is. For now, keep the question. Just don't let it replace your ability to still be surprised by people. Let me ask you something. Have you noticed that none of these practices are actually about Cleopatra? They're about you. Cleopatra is simply the mirror. The archetype isn't asking you to imitate a queen. It's asking you to rediscover the ruler that's been quietly waiting inside your own psychology.
Here's where this gets personal. A lot of people don't need more information. They need permission to stop abandoning themselves. They already know what they want. They know which dream they keep postponing, which conversation they're avoiding, which environment is quietly draining them. They know. They're just waiting for approval, for certainty, for someone else to understand first. This archetype doesn't wait for life to make sovereignty convenient. It asks a sharper question. If not now, when exactly? That question is dangerous because once you ask it honestly, your excuses start to collapse. You might realize you're staying in a relationship that no longer honors you, or building a life that looks responsible but feels dead inside. Healthy Cleopatra energy isn't selfish, it's self-honoring. Selfishness says only I matter. Self-honor says I matter too. For someone who spent years being easy to love because they never asked for too much, that second sentence can be genuinely revolutionary. Your move this week. Write down 3 things you've postponed waiting on someone else's approval. Pick one. Take one visible action toward it. Send the message, book the appointment, have the conversation. But notice something. The same fire that says no more shrinking can, unchecked, become no more considering anyone else at all. Self-honor becomes self-obsession the moment you stop checking whether you're protecting your peace or just avoiding the discomfort of someone else's needs. Hold both. Most people misunderstand courage. They think it means acting without fear. It doesn't. Courage means seeing the fear clearly and refusing to let it drive. This archetype doesn't jump blind. She observes, calculates, studies the room, and moves anyway. That's completely different from impulsiveness. Impulsiveness says, I want this now. Strategic courage says, I understand the cost and I'm willing to pay it. The question worth asking isn't, what would I do if nobody judged me? It's, what would I do if I trusted myself to handle whatever came next? Because most people aren't actually afraid of failing, they're afraid of being seen trying, caught in that awkward middle between the old identity and the new one, where people can still ask, who do you think you are? The answer this archetype gives back is simple. I'm becoming the person who no longer needs that question answered by anyone else. The shadow, though, is close by here too. Strategic courage that stops calculating cost, that starts chasing expansion for its own sake, regardless of who pays for it, isn't courage anymore. It's just ambition wearing courage's clothes. We'll get to that fully in a minute. One of the biggest myths about Cleopatra is that people followed her because she was beautiful. Ancient historians rarely even ranked her as the most beautiful woman of her era. What they described again and again was something harder to name: presence. Presence isn't something people give you, it's something you stop taking away from yourself. Think about how most conversations actually go. While someone's talking, you're already rehearsing your reply, checking your phone, wondering how you're being perceived. Half your attention is already gone. Jung believed that wherever attention goes, psychic energy follows. Scattered attention creates scattered energy, and scattered people rarely feel powerful no matter how much they achieve. Practice. In your next important conversation, remove every distraction. No phone, no rehearsing your next line. Just listen, longer than feels comfortable. Notice what people avoid saying. You'll be surprised how much influence comes from watching, not speaking. Here's the trap. Presence without warmth attached turns into performance, a practice stillness that's really just detachment wearing a calm face. If people start describing you as hard to read instead of someone I trust, that's not mystery. That's the shadow settling in quietly. Jung spent much of his life studying what happens when people become disconnected from themselves, and he noticed something unsettling. Most people never consciously choose their lives, they inherit them. Their ambitions, their fears, even their definition of success, decided by parents, culture, comparison before it was ever questioned. This archetype interrupts that. It asks, what do I actually think? Not what would people approve of, not what am I supposed to want, but what's true for me. That question sounds simple. It isn't. The moment you ask it honestly, you start separating your own voice from the noise you've collected your whole life. And that separation can feel lonely before it feels free. One practice Jung returned to often was reflection without editing, sitting with a journal and writing whatever surfaces without polishing it. The unconscious rarely speaks in complete sentences. It speaks in patterns. Once you start noticing them, you stop living on autopilot. But this is exactly where the sharpest version of the shadow lives, the one almost nobody names. Separating your voice from the noise is healthy. Deciding your voice is the only one worth hearing is not. That's the exact hinge this archetype swings on. So let's go there directly. Every archetype has a shadow. Not because something went wrong, because every human being carries qualities they'd rather not look at. Jung called it exactly that, the shadow. It isn't evil, it's unconscious, and the more you deny it, the more it quietly runs you. Cleopatra's shadow is one of the sharpest of all, because it's built from the same material as her strength. Confidence becomes superiority. Every archetype becomes dangerous the moment it believes it no longer needs balance. Confidence stops listening, strategy stops feeling, presence stops connecting, leadership stops serving. Little by little, the queen becomes the tyrant. Not because she intended to, but because no human being is immune to their own unconscious. Strategy becomes manipulation, self-respect becomes arrogance, presence becomes performance, and this rarely happens overnight. It happens one justified decision at a time, one conversation where being right mattered more than understanding, one relationship where winning replaced intimacy, one moment where vulnerability started feeling weak instead of human. Ask yourself honestly on a regular basis, where am I trying to control what I should simply understand? Where am I protecting my ego instead of protecting my peace? Where have I mistaken emotional distance for confidence? These questions are supposed to feel uncomfortable. The unconscious doesn't become conscious through compliments. It becomes conscious through honesty. And that honesty is the actual birthplace of the power this archetype promises, not the crown, the mirror. Understanding an archetype is one thing, living it is another. Jung often reminded his students that insight without action changes almost nothing. Real change happens when understanding becomes habit. So for the next 7 days, here's one small shift each day. Not to imitate Cleopatra, to strengthen what she represents and keep an eye on what she warns against. Day 1. Observe. Say less than usual. Walk into every conversation asking, "What am I missing?" Train perception before you train anything else. Day 2. Move. Make one decision you've been postponing. It doesn't need to be dramatic. Send the message, book the appointment. Every postponed decision quietly teaches your unconscious that hesitation is your identity. Today, teach it something else. Day 3. Protect your attention. 1 full hour, 0 distractions, 1 meaningful task. This archetype isn't built through busyness. It's built through where you choose to spend focus. Day 4. Speak with intention. Slow down. Pause before responding. Trade the need to impress for the desire to understand. People trust certainty more than speed. Day 5. Do the thing that scares your ego, not your safety. Ask the question, share the idea. Confidence isn't created after courage. It's created by it every time. Day 6. Meet your shadow on purpose. Before sleep, write down one honest answer to, where have I been trying to control someone instead of understanding them? Don't judge it, just look at it. Day 7. Keep one promise to yourself, just one, that no one else even knows about. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, something in you quietly starts trusting you again. That trust is the real foundation, not the confidence that looks good on camera.
Don't expect to become a different person after 7 days. Expect to notice yourself more clearly. That's how every meaningful transformation begins. Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." These 7 days aren't about becoming Cleopatra. They're about interrupting unconscious patterns that may have been quietly living your life for you. History remembers Cleopatra as a queen. Psychology remembers her differently, as a pattern, a possibility, a warning built into the same shape as the gift. She represents the exact moment someone stops asking, "What will make me acceptable?" and starts asking, "What am I actually here to build?" Jung believed the goal of life was never perfection. It was individuation, becoming who you actually are, not who your parents imagined, not who fear built, not who comparison shaped. Who you become when the conscious mind and the unconscious finally start working together instead of against each other. This archetype was never asking you to become royalty. It was asking you to become responsible for your own inner kingdom, to govern your emotions instead of being governed by them, to seek understanding instead of admiration, integrity instead of control. Because the greatest empire Cleopatra ever had to rule wasn't Egypt, it was herself. Maybe the same is true for you. Maybe that's why Cleopatra still fascinates us after more than 2,000 years. Not because she ruled Egypt, but because she represents something every human being eventually has to confront. The question isn't whether history will remember your name. The question is, when no one is watching, when the noise disappears, when no one is left to tell you who you should become, who governs your life then? If you trusted yourself completely, what's one decision you'd make this week? Tell me in the comments. Someone else might find the courage they need just from reading your answer. And if this kind of work resonates with you, subscribe to Archetypes in Action. This is only the beginning.